The U.S. Supreme Court's overturning of Roe versus Wade was a direct attack on women. It will result in countless deaths, especially among vulnerable women, and it set civil liberties in the United States back by half a century. Now the court has made yet another really devastating decision for humanity. In a 6-3 decision, the openly partisan and undemocratic court ruled in favor of a lawsuit brought on by fossil fuel producing states against the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. The decision strips power from regulatory agencies and advances the Republican goal to end government oversight. In particular, it eliminates one of the only remaining avenues for systemic federal climate action, using the Clean Air Act to phase out fossil fuel power plants. As a result, it may now be mathematically impossible through available avenues for the U.S. to achieve its goal of having greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, which is anyway feeling dangerously unambitious in the light of recent climate disasters. In an era of crises, global heating increasingly stands out as the single greatest emergency humanity faces. Global heating is driving extreme heat, drought, and flooding in the U.S. and around the world. It's driving wildfire and ecosystem collapse, and may already be contributing to famine and warfare. Crucially, this is all worsening day by day, and it will continue to worsen until we end the fossil fuel industry. The scientific consensus is that global carbon dioxide emissions must peak now, i.e. between 2020 and 2025, and no new fossil infrastructure can be built if we are to preserve a 2/3 chance of keeping mean global heat below 2°C. In my opinion, our current level of mean global heating of 1.3°C is obviously unsafe. 1.5°C we are on track to reach in the early 2030s would be catastrophic, and 2°C, which we are on track to reach mid-century, could make global civilization as we know it impossible. There are stakes of this Supreme Court decision, which adds another layer onto already daunting strata of blocks to climate action. More than half, a quarter of the members of Congress are still hard climate deniers. These 139 Republican members, more than half of the Republican total, including Mitch McConnell, have accepted $61 million so far in direct contributions from the fossil fuel industry, not including indirect support. Many other members of Congress also accept fossil fuel money, including Democrats. Indeed. The politician who takes the most is Joe Manchin, and 4 of the top 10 are also Democrats. In the White House, we have a president who has recently put fossil fuel expansion and lower gas prices at the top of his agenda, who barely mentioned climate in his first State of the Union address, who approved far more new drilling permits during the first year than Trump, and who has deep ties to the fossil fuel industry. Internationally, we have annual meetings which have failed us for 26 years, perhaps because they have been deeply compromised by the fossil fuel industry. Conflict of interest, lobbying, bribery, whatever you choose to call it, amounts to already rich, further enriching themselves at enormous cost to humanity and the rest of the earth. And it extends all the way to the justices themselves. This is the intersection of social system designed to concentrate wealth like gravitational singularity, we call it capitalism, and fossil fuel power. For example, billionaire Charles Koch, who runs the world's largest privately held fossil fuel corporation, not only directly pushed for this decision, he campaigned to install the 3 Republican justices in the first place. Rupert Murdoch has spent decades creating a worldwide climate denial media empire that includes Fox News, and fossil fuel executives have colluded for decades to prevent climate action with full knowledge of the consequences. Without a living planet, nothing else matters. As the Earth's capacity to support life continues to degrade, millions, eventually billions of people will be displaced and die. Fascism will rise, climate wars will intensify, and the rule of law will break down. The myth of American exceptionalism will offer no protection from deadly heat and climate famine. In the U.S., we now live under the sway of robed, superstitious fools, hell-bent on rolling back basic civil liberties and rejecting scientific facts. Carl Sagan, warning against this sort of anti-science, wrote, quote, "The candle flame gutters. Its little pool of light trembles. Darkness gathers. The demons begin to stir," unquote. The consequences of ignoring scientists for too long are coming home to roost. We desperately need a government working to stop Earth's breakdown rather than to accelerate it. But petitions or pleas to vote harder will not make this happen. Due to capture by the ultra-rich, our only option is to fight, to shift society into emergency mode and end the fossil fuel industry. We must join together and do all we can to wake people up to the grave danger we are in. We must engage in climate disobedience. I believe the tides could still turn. The power could shift suddenly. But this can only happen when enough people join the fight. And that was Peter Kalmus, and hello, Antonio. Hello, everyone. How are you tonight? Did you all get that? Peter Kalmus wrote a pretty goddamn good article. And now I'm going to give it over to Antonio. Hi, Antonio. Take it away, baby.
Hey, Sandy, thank you. All right, thank you for that reading. Hey, everyone, this is a very sober afternoon. Obviously, the Supreme Court has been, in Justice Sotomayor's words, very restless, particularly on their radical and reactionary agenda when it comes to abortion, when it comes to now environmental policy and the EPA, obviously gun control rights, and of course what's going to be a battle over gay marriage is going to be relitigated by this court. At least that's what Clarence Thomas has pointed out in one of his opinions. So tonight we're talking about more specifically the crisis with the EPA and really the crisis happening on planet Earth. So, I was one of the, I'm sure many of us had foreseen that the Supreme Court was going to take a pretty aggressive position against climate activism from the government. In my view, as an American Negro, it's no surprise. I think it is the history of the United States Supreme Court to be as regressive as possible. The court was behind on the issue of slavery. It was behind on the issue of civil rights. It was behind on the issue of women's rights. It was behind on the issue of environmentalism. It's actually been behind on every major issue facing our country. So it doesn't surprise me that today, facing the really enormous Herculean crisis of climate change, that the Supreme Court would be way off the mark again. And they demonstrated that in their last case. Now, it's important to understand the history of the EPA. First and foremost, the EPA is a Republican brainchild. It's the brainchild of Richard Nixon, 1970. So you have to understand, it actually took a lot of intellectual and social in environmental conscious progress in the United States
Mm-hmm.
to get us to 1970. The pre 1970 period, Americans did not have a very wide or robust understanding of human action and its impact on the environment. And the first time that we really began to realize that humans had very detrimental impacts on the environment that could blow back and impact our own social, economic, political status was during the Dust Bowl. But of course, we would
Ah.
see other magnificent environmental crises throughout American history leading up to 1970. And the issue would come ahead actually by Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, writing about the issue with pesticides, which I guess now has been largely ignored. Um,
Largely, you say.
so,
Yeah.
so all the matter that's done. But that's really how we got the EPA through fierce activism along during the civil rights movement. The EPA came along, activists were pushing the Nixon administration to finally start responding to many of the environmentals that the United States was facing. Um, of course, we'd have our first Earth Day a few days later, or a few years later, and that's kind of the legacy of the EPA. And
Earth
ever since,
Day.
the EPA has been empowered by, of course, the Clean Water and Clean Air Act, but it's also been empowered by the Obama administration to finally start addressing climate change. Now, here's the issue. So, according to the so-called moderate, which I don't think that Justice Roberts is moderate, but mainstream America says that he's moderate on the issue. He says that
Oh
while it would
boy.
seem prudent um, to have the EPA regulate in such a way that it would transition our energy system away from carbon dioxide, which is exacerbating the climate crisis, it clearly isn't in the authority for the EPA to do that. Well, okay, but the Obama administration and the Democrats that were in power at the time
Yeah.
have passed specific legislation that gave the EPA that authority. The EPA has not just decided that they were going to start regulating CO2 as a greenhouse gas, as a climate pollutant. That was an initiative that was pushed by the Congress, by the Democratic Congress, and by the Obama administration. So I'm not exactly sure what they're going after here, but the issue that is arising is that what they want to do is to say that the legislative structure that enables these executive agencies to act is now into question. That's
Right.
the problem. It's not the issue that they're engaged in the regulation, but the legislative structure that enables them to do so isn't clear and ought to be clear on such big questions. Now, the whole purpose of this, of course, is this court is ideologically driven. So they're trying to use this tool to essentially enact the Mitchell McConnell Republican agenda. I mean, that is why Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, and Barrett are on the court.
Yep.
I remember talking specifically with Dr. Greg Marlin back in 2017 when Kavanaugh was being debated, and I said, everybody's talking about, did he or did he not engage in perverse activity? My concern was that he was coming to the Supreme Court right in time to rule against God and to rule against nature. And of course, now they are here. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
the six horsemen of the populace, so to speak, of the traditional
Yeah.
populace are here.
Yeah. There's six of them. There used to be four. Then now there's
So,
six. Yeah.
and these are, I
Yeah.
always say, if it doesn't work out, it's only a lifetime appointment.
Only a
Uh,
lifetime appointment. Only a lifetime up. That's like the most ridiculous. It's done. We're so out of touch. We're so out of touch.
we are
Oh my
done, and
god.
that was the
Yeah. We are
and
done.
for many people in our community, I think a lot of us recognize that the climate crisis was already getting ahead. that we had already lost control of the system. But this was just for if there's anyone who was hoping that there was going to be this last bit reaction, no. The Supreme Court is going to be there every step of the way. And that's why it's so important the way they are pulling apart the EPA's authority. It's line by line, it's comma by comma. So right at the time that we're dealing with the greatest crises that humanity's ever faced, we got to do immediate action. We got to world time mobilization. The
God.
Supreme Court is here to hold us up and make sure that we're using the right pen. It's so, I
Using the
mean, it's
right
really,
pen. Oh my God,
it's
Antonio. Oh.
it's really incredible because go back to Robert's opinion. He recognizes that we face an existential crisis,
But
and he's
he's
still asking, "Are we putting the comma in the right place anyway?" So, I mean,
but they're deniers. A lot of them are deniers, and they also believe in the free market system. They don't want any regulations. It's a libertarian Republican court. They don't want any regulations because let the market destroy the planet even faster. Do you think
right.
that
I mean,
the fossil fuel
the
industry
crux
is going to?
of that is the crux of their judicial activism. And that's why I describe the court as being this is the most radical reactionary court since the Lockyer era, since the end of the Jim Crow era. And I mean, with the strike down of Roe v. Wade, I mean, we got to remember that Roe on case law is based upon the fundamental right to privacy. And this court is ruling and undermining that fundamental right to
Uh,
privacy.
yes, they
Okay,
are.
this
Mhm.
court has no respect for democracy, and it doesn't have respect for the will of the people. This court has an agenda, and it's going to enact that agenda on America. I mean, it has gone after separation church and state. Um, Now we can use tax dollars, public tax dollars, to fund, radical schools that believe that there's a fairy in the sky that died on the cross for you 2,000 years ago, so we don't have to worry about climate change because JC is going to arrive right before it
Uh,
gets too bad. Um, so when you're dealing with this type of radical fundamentalist ideology, and it's covered in the ambiance and the eloquence and class of judicial speak, it becomes incredibly dangerous. And that's what we're dealing with during the time that we're dealing with in an immense crisis, which, if we don't get this in hand, will probably claim our species.
I feel that um, that is not going to change. I cannot see. I mean, Rich Diana says the corporate Dems won't change anything. It seems like it is just meant to happen. The world is going to go through this authoritarian change, and it's not. It's our country. It's Russia. It's China. They're all going to be authoritarian until the end, and maybe it will have to become. Now I'm talking like a conspiracy theorist, but maybe it's going to have to become one world order to stop everybody from using all this shit. But it's only the America. It's only the Western states that are really wrecking everything.
Well, the issue that
Unfortunately.
we found ourselves in is that the systems that we created
Mhm.
were created in a pre environment conscious human identity. And
Mm.
in so doing, we created very sophisticated and delicate institutions and systems to govern our society. And these institutions and systems were born in a time, again, that wasn't conscious of this type of reality. And so now we become recently conscious of our impact on the biosphere, and our institutions are even slower to react. Institutions, by their nature, are conservative. They're meant to preserve the legacy of whatever culture or nation state or company. That's what institutions are designed to do. They're not designed to face new truths and change radically to them. That's really our slaving endeavor to do, is to change the institutions. And so we kind of see that here in the manifestation of this most radical reactionary court, is that it's actually, in this sense, it ought to be against moving progressively, against changing the system, because that is what the court was essentially designed to do. It was for those who wanted to end slavery. The court was there to act as an obstacle to that progress. For those who wanted to accept women as full humans, the court was there as an obstacle
Oh,
to
really?
that.
Full
Uh,
humans? We're going to lose that. I don't feel like full human anymore.
well,
Something
see,
changed.
the court still reeling its ugly head on these
Oh my
issues.
gosh.
So we thought we won the issue, and it was so funny because, if I can, a little bit about Juneteenth that recently passed. Uh, Juneteenth was recognized as when the last slaves had finally gotten word of the emancipation.
Yep.
Um, but what struck me as odd, of course, is that Martin Luther King was still dreaming of freedom 100 years after that Emancipation Declaration. And of course, if you read Michelle Alexander, we're new Jim Crow. so
Oh
so
yeah.
so this is American pie. This is apple pie here. The court ought to be standing fiercely in the way of progress on the climate. And this is deeply rooted in capitalism. You have to understand,
Oh yeah.
capitalists understand the environment as a commodity and as property. So, in of itself, nature doesn't have rights, none that we have to recognize.
No, nature doesn't have rights, and it never had rights to religious people either, who believed that nature was there for them, the bounty. It belongs to us, and that's why we're here.
And right, and Clarence Thomas again had that genuinely is his view that on this issue, rights have to be historical. And to me, the issue with that is, well, what if we were wrong in the past?
Well, yeah.
Are we gonna?
What
Are we?
if? I think we've been
Well,
wrong many times.
are we just gonna base all of our new decisions off of those decisions that were wrong in the past?
Oh my
I
God.
mean, just before the emancipation, there was a history of Negroes being slaves. So what prehistory was there in America where Negroes weren't slaves? Well, then I guess according to the conservative court, American Negroes have no historical right to freedom.
Holy shit. Oh,
This is
wow.
the
Do
danger
you
that the
really
court.
think these people are going to go to this degree to go
Well,
backwards? What are we going backwards to? 1660,
that
1760.
was Thomas's argument against gay
Oh
marriage,
my
is that
God.
historically there was no right to gay marry in the United States. So how could it be the intentions and protected by the Constitution if so
Won't
if
be.
if, if such a right was not historically present? Well, again, there a whole host of rights were not historically present in debates of the constitutional
Of course they
conventions.
weren't.
And by the way, we have to end this religion around the Constitution. The Constitution, well, it is like a Bible. It's a very uh, it was decently written. It's very flawed. It's fallacious. It's manifestations of human design. It's not divine in its origin. It's not perfect. It needs to be reworked, probably every generation.
Wow.
But again, we have this almost biblical lore to the way we view the Constitution of the United States. Um, but there really ought not be this type of mystique around our Constitution. We should not enshrine it on a religious level. And that's
No,
what
and
this.
We have politicians like I should have played the clip. Lauren Boebert sitting there saying, "I'm tired of this crap. That the church should be leading government." Oh my God! I feel like I'm living in a dystopian, crazy fucking movie, and it's not. And the EPA decision really upsets Peter Kalmus, but I mean, you're illustrating the listen. You gave me the idea for the gutting picture, the gutting of the EPA. What else is going to be gutted, Antonio? Like,
I
what's
mean,
on the.
we're talking about it. I mean, they're going to go through this. This court
Well,
has
yeah,
an
I know we're.
agenda.
Okay. I mean,
We
did
just
something
saw
come to your head?
we just saw abortion get gutted. We just saw the EPA get gutted. We're going to watch gay rights get gutted. We're watching gun control get gutted. I mean, so
What
this is.
else?
I mean, this court is really going to go after. I mean, we're watching education with this decision of using tax dollars to support religious schools, and it is very dystopic what we're dealing with because again, we're dealing with real crisis that threaten the continuity of our species this century, and
Not giving up.
we have a Supreme Court that just won't hear it. Uh, and that's extremely dangerous. Now, I think a lot of the remedies that people are putting forth are just as dangerous. Expanding the court. Well, okay, that works until Biden and the Democrats are so corporate, so terrible that they still don't forgive student loans. They don't do anything about medical debt. They don't do anything about universal health care. They don't do anything about universal jobs. Don't do anything about
Nothing.
housing equity. Don't do anything about living wages. That they don't win in 24 and Donald Trump comes or Ron DeSantis comes back and now we got an expanded court to
Oh
11
my
and they
God.
sit two more conservative justices. Well, great. We expand the court.
Okay,
Now,
can I do something? I really think that expanding the court, maybe the way you just described it, gets it gets the environmental coffee house flush of the day. We don't know whether to flush expanding it. I think we should flush expanding it for everything you just explained.
so, I mean, but that's the real crisis that we face. And it is really, like you say, Sandy, it is a nail in the coffin because um, we clearly, I mean, look, I mean, we've gotten a 1-2 knockout blow. And by the way, the state that's leading this lawsuit, of course, was West Virginia, Joe Manchin
Yeah,
state. And
yeah,
so
a little
Joe
fascist.
Manchin beat us with a club, curb stumped us on Build Back Better, which, by the way, wasn't our first defeat. Remember, I was on Tom Hartman with Congressman Rokana, and we
Yeah.
were talking about how the $3.5 trillion bill was a huge sacrifice. That how dare we only offer $1.35 trillion to respond? And by the way, it wasn't $1.3 trillion for just climate. That was broken down over a lot of different things. But how dare we offer only that package to respond to the climate crisis? But that got completely thrown out the window. Nobody's even talked about the 3.5.
No.
And then we got the $1.2 trillion Build Back Better plan completely thrown out the window as well. And now, so we got Bernie's plan thrown out the window. We got Biden's no plan thrown out the window. And now the court says, whatever other thing that you guys thought you were going to do, you can't do it. We don't know what you thought you thought. We don't know what you thought you think you could do, but you can't do it. Can't do it. So,
Um, I want to read
so
a comment to you. I don't mean to interrupt, but
sure, go ahead.
it's perfect for right now. Hi, Connor, by the way. Simple solution: make all Circuit Court of Appeals judges rotate to hear individual cases on rotating random basis, one case at a time. Well, wait a minute. How is that a solution if something still goes to you're saying that won't go to the Supreme Court? What do you think of that, Antonio?
Well, I don't know what that would do in terms of something percolating up to the Supreme Court, because sure you might get different leaning political judges in a scheme like that, but that doesn't necessarily stop something being appealed on up. So I don't understand why that would be a solution.
Yeah, okay. I got it. Well, Connor, it was something. Oh, he said that would replace the Supreme Court. Oh, just saying goodbye, Supreme Court, and we do it the way that you just let me get that back because this was really interesting. All right, so we say goodbye to the Supreme Court, and we have all Circuit Court of Appeal judges rotate, and that's it. So there's not a non-supreme horrible court. How would we go about doing that politically in the United States? We can't get jack shit done.
Yeah, it's really hard to say because there's so much friction in this country right now, and there's so much political polarization that it's really, even when we agree on an issue, when it comes to actually getting things done, which is the definition of politics, we're not able to. We have a political paralysis. So this is going to be, I mean, this is already a magnificent task that was ahead of us already. How are we going to mobilize the population? How are we going to mobilize our resources and time
Well, I'm
to
mobilized, but
blunt the worst
in
effects of the climate
time.
crisis?
Yeah, in time. But we still got to do what we can do locally. I mean, I'm always busy doing things with this committee or that, whatever. But you get to think when you live in a rural area like me, people are impervious to understanding. Not all people, but a lot of people are impervious to understanding reality in the first place, let alone giving a shit about the Supreme Court other than what they see on social media or Twitter, and it's with the Twitterverse of ignorance and Facebook. Nobody knows really what's underneath these. Nobody.
Well, I think what's important for the average person is that in terms of thinking about systems, honestly, the only thing that people can do that's going to have a resolve on the federal level is that you have to intensely make sure that you're voting for progressives. I
Yeah.
think that that's one good thing that came out of the Roe v. Wade decision is that increasingly what I call kind of white suburbanite liberals have been woken up to the fact that Democrats haven't just been trying their best,
No.
doing the best they can at the time, and they just so happen not to be able to get the things that we all think are good ideas. And that's kind of been the Democratic Party of white liberalism for the last 30 years. Is that, oh, yeah, we want universal health care, but we're going to vote for Hillary Clinton and she doesn't want it. But we think that voting for her, even though she
Yeah.
doesn't want it, is the best way to get it eventually. That type of man's mindset appears to be completely coming to an end. This idea that we're going to vote for people that we know are antithetical to our cause because somehow that's going to get us closer in the long that 4D dimensional chess move that white middle class and upper middle class and working class liberals have been playing for the last 30 years of the Democratic Party. Oh, we're going to vote for the moderate because that's the reasonable way to get to where we want to get. Well, we've been
It's not
reasonably
getting there.
getting to universal Medicare for all since
Yeah.
1992 and haven't gotten there. We're nowhere.
No.
We're nowhere closer today than we are in
No.
'92. And the same thing on the climate issue. Our emissions are worse off. And we were talking about the EPA being its authority being hammered, but I still don't know if we ought to be trusting the EPA. The EPA has been hijacked by both Democrat and Republican administrations time after time after time on major issues. I mean, again, I just point back at the Obama administration hijacking the EPA on the fracking issue. And the EPA is still telling us
Yep.
that methane emissions in the United States have remained flat and in fact have been going down over the last 30 years.
No.
How have we been able to achieve that after
Yeah.
going through a fracking boom? And then we find that the amount that wells leak methane into the atmosphere, we were told by the industry was at 1% rate, and then found out by the New York Times was actually 4%. But somehow, again, our methane emissions in the United States are steadily going down. So we already had a deficit of trust with the institution in the first place, and now whatever teeth, whatever honesty, whatever good that was buried deep down inside of the heart of the institution of the EPA has been now completely
There
ripped out and
was
thrown out the window.
good. I worked in university research. We got EPA grant money and we cleaned up Lake Erie and New
Well, no,
York
I'm saying
State. You know, I mean,
that's
there were
I
always
believe
good
that,
people, but
but
it's
whatever
sad
good
when
is
they're
there,
politicized. The
right, whatever good
politicization.
is there is being increasingly hijacked, and now the court has just ended basically the ability for the EPA to act effectively on the largest crises that we face. Um, how are we going to deal with this if we can't effectively regulate emissions coming out of smokestacks from power plants?
How? We're not. I mean, I don't think that the industry is going to self-regulate. Do you? Do you think that Exxon and
Yeah,
do
I
you
think
think
they're
they're
going to
going to do it?
self-regulate.
You think they're going to do it?
They've been self-regulating all along. This is what self this is what self-regulation looks like. It looks like a disaster.
Yeah, but the disaster is going to come out of the tailpipe, and the disaster is going to come out of corporations that have buildings that are manufacturing. Are we going to go back to looking like LA or when I grew up, going down to the Bronx and seeing the smokestacks and New York was filthy. It was filthy. You couldn't see, you
Well,
couldn't swim in the Hudson. Are we
I
going
don't
back?
think that that level of pollution is going to come back because, first of all, we're a much less industrialized country than we were when those sorts of pollutions were around. I think now the crisis is CO2. And what's particularly dangerous about
Okay.
CO2 is that it isn't. It isn't so reactionary. Putting CO2 into the atmosphere isn't like polluting a river. It isn't like smog in the sky.
You can't
It's
see
you
it.
can't smell it, you can't see it, you
Right.
can't interact with it, and because there's these limited sensory perceptions around CO2, it's harder to mobilize the public around the danger that it poses, and it does actually pose now the greatest
Right.
threat of probably any environmental pollutant.
But Marjorie Taylor Greene says that it's good for you. And she's telling everybody that CO2, oh my God, the world is getting greener and it's good for the crops because she's spouting the Heartland Institute garbage and people are believing it. People are literally like starting to look at her and think she's credible. And that's very scary.
Well,
Very
this is
scary.
what happens. I'm a cultural pessimist. I genuinely believe that the United States culture is engaged in a form of social suicide. And
There you
climate
go.
change is not, like a pair of scissors is not a tool of death, but to a potential suicidee, the way that they engage that pair of scissors, it can be. And so, whereas we didn't intentionally cause climate change as a way to destroy our civilization, as a kind of sociopathic, psychotic, narcissistic entity that doesn't care about self-preservation, and certainly not generational preservation. Um,
Nope.
our actions are so self-injurious that they are suicidal. And here it's like, a drug addict. The byproduct, so a drug addict might see their health in decline, but that's not why they're on drugs. They're not on drugs because their health is declining. They're on drugs because they're getting their rush. And the byproduct is their health is declining.
Yeah.
But every time that they get their rush, they just put that issue to the side over and over again, until now their body's in a critical and crisis state,
It's kind
um,
of
and
exhausting.
that's where we're going to go with no help.
No
Um,
help.
this is the alcoholic who is 16 cans in and says they're fine because they can still speak.
I'm fine.
They're a functional alcoholic.
Yeah. 16 cans. I know people that do drink a lot. They
Yeah.
yeah, well, 16 is excessive, but that's wow. Oh, Earl, me MTG versus AOC. Oh my gosh. Of course we would like to see an AOC type person. She's young and dynamic and she's not spouting uh gross crap lie bullshit that the other one is. It's just terrible that there has to be them against us and all of this shit.
It's kind
First
of
world.
interesting
Yeah.
because, I think about this. We're all here as a humanity together, and
Yeah.
the 2020s are really going to be the last decade that seems like anything like normal.
I'm
What's going to
sorry,
happen
Antonio. You're so young. I am so sorry. I'm seriously
when
apologizing to you for the fucking shit we've left. And I know I didn't do it on purpose, but in total, I'm sorry.
well, absolutely, but it makes me wonder, like, what's going to happen as we get closer. And I use 2030 as a date, not because, and I'm not one of these people who believe that the world's going to
No,
click
it's
off
not.
like a TV screen on
No,
2030,
you've
but I do
described that.
believe we are headed toward. I mean, there is no other option. I mean, we were told that if we don't do anything, the apocalypse is coming, and then we didn't do anything, and now it's coming. I don't understand. Yeah, I keep on the analogy that I made with my brother is like, imagine you're on a high speed train
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the train is going straight into a 90-degree cliff. Okay. Just because everyone on the train says that physics isn't real, that even if physics is real, the train is moving so fast that we'll just go through the mountainside. It doesn't matter what fantasy people conjure up. The reality is, once the train hits it's over for everyone on board. It's over for me, even if I really believe physics, that it's real, that, if a train hits the wall at 100, 200 miles an hour, everybody is on board is going to die. The person who thinks that if we hit it, it will turn into a cartoon bubble and we'll all be fine, or the person who says that there's no wall, it doesn't matter the spectrum of opinion on reality. Reality itself is completely unfazed by what humans think and what humans say.
I will agree with that.
And so
Because
that's kind of
we
where we
bel
are. We're all on
we
the train.
believe in people. They believe in that fairy that's going to save us up there.
I
Sorry.
mean, some people, I've spoken to people on the right who are Christians, and they, who nominally believe in climate change, and they say things like, "Well, Jesus will come before it gets too bad." And I said, "Wow, I guess he's so late for so many already."
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I
but
just
but
I don't
but Jesus will come
understand
for
it.
them right on time.
Right. And that's another thing that's going on the court, with this whole praying thing. I've been seeing the memes where it's going to be pagan princesses coming into school and saying, okay, it's prayer time, and all these different crazy things going on just to be in, rebellion against the Christo fascism, as some of our people are calling it in the chat, which does seem to be the case, Antonio. Just does. They're winning. What happened? They're winning.
Well, this is we got to remember though, this is America, right?
Wow.
We've been here before. I mean, the court is supposed to be the
Okay.
vanguard to the worst aspects of our society. Okay, um, and I guess as an American Negro, this just doesn't surprise me.
No.
The court is just acting in its historic character, and it's our job to get those extremely privileged little boys and girls under control. Because power really does go to people's
Oh,
heads. I
I
mean,
wish I had a slap. I don't think I have a slap sound. That would work.
it, power really does go to people's heads. I mean, when those folks put on the black gowns, they know
Yeah.
that they have the power of presidents.
Wow.
You know, they
Yes.
understand their power. I mean, when Alito Scalia was hearing his name, he used to love that. He knew, oh, all the liberals hate me, and the
He's such a
academic
little.
gravitas and the
Yeah.
importance of my figure and my legacy. They understand that. They understand that anyone basically, on these branches of the United States government become, by definition, of the most powerful people in human history, but by the title of their position. And of course,
Mm.
a Supreme Court justice. I mean, you're really of the few people who are at the steering wheel of American history. And right now, um, Gar- Garland, um, Kavanaugh, Barrett, Alito, Thomas, and Roberts understand that.
You pass.
That right now they're at the forefront of history, and they're
Yes.
steering the wheel.
Yeah. But the unfortunate part is who's going to care about the history in 30 years or 40 years or 50 years when it's going to be quite a different story. Like Rich said a lot earlier, people will make, I don't know if I have it, but people will, make everything will be panic decisions, you know.
Oh yeah, I mean this is how, I don't want to be dark or gloomy or doomer, but of course
Okay.
this is, the light for human civilization is going off, and it ends in a crazy social derangement. There is no
Yes.
such thing as truth. There is an alternative truth. There is no reality. The Supreme Court is ruling against nature. So this is how the end is supposed to happen. There's supposed to be less logic, less reason, less compassion at the end. That's how it comes crashing down. And so as we get closer to the end, we're going to start to see our institutions have these convulsions more often. And that's why, I mean, look, in 2020, American trust in public institutions had went to the lowest we've seen in history, where 70% of the American public agreed that burning down a police precinct was justified in the wake of the George Floyd murder. So we've already had major public trust deficits in our criminal justice institutions. We've,
Yep.
of course, since the 2008 financial crisis, had major public deficits in our financial institutions. Of course, we've for a long time had deficits in our educational institutions. And of course, we don't trust our political institutions, but now they've become completely awry. And the stop to steal has completely eroded even the bare minimum levels of trust that we did have in our political system.
You mean Mike
And
Lindell is making headway?
and now this court has so radical and so reactionary that it is delegitimizing the last bit of trust that Americans have in the judiciary. And that's exactly what we ought to, again, as a cultural
Trust.
pessimist, that is exactly what we ought to see, is that the collapse of our institutions are going full steam ahead. And Chomsky's right. If we were a healthy society, our institutions would be leading the way in dealing with these crises. But here in a dying suicidal society, our institutions are leading the way in the social suicide.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess we are headed. It's a collapse situation, and no matter what, there's this whole big post collapse and collapse movement to help people understand where we are, where we're going, and how to live a full life. Not, I don't know if politics is always involved with them, but I don't know. While there's a system, I'll probably always be part of it in some way, some way locally. Not that I'm running for school board. I could just imagine them looking at me.
I mean, it's very scary because, as a historian, I don't believe
I
in
know.
an ability for individuals to change the course or tide of history, nor do I believe the arc of history is always progress. So to me, there is there's no in for us. We look back at the World War II period historically, and we see it from the point of view of hindsight. So for us, history ended positively. But you also have to remember that people in 1900 history didn't end positively for them in 40 and 45 or in 42. Okay, history
Right.
ended in a cataclysm. Okay, so it ended well for us, but that's because we were born in hindsight. uh, so because think about that, people in 1900, if they believe this idea that history is always getting better, that eventually the future will be better, that wasn't true for them.
Mm,
It wasn't true for them.
mm.
And it's not necessarily going to be true for us. What I believe instead is that history occurs in cycles, that we go through golden ages, ages of extremism, and ages of consequences. And we are out of
Okay.
our golden age. We are well within our age of extremism, and this is part of the extremism is this inability for humans to functionally respond to realities, and of course, the age of consequences will be all of that coming to an end.
The age of consequences. I have nothing to say. You've taken it away. And that's not usual. How are you all doing out there? Gary says highly authoritarian fascist national state governments. There may be some hope in establishing local lifeboat communities, but prepare to simply center in love in the present moment and love my area where I live and try to make it
Well, I'm
better.
going to come up there with you, Sandy, because it's too damn hot here.
Okay.
I mean, we're
Okay.
not doing any. If kumbaya has to be somewhere, if we're going to kumbaya somewhere and there's not going to be AC, I don't think I can do it.
Not there.
I,
Dawn moved to Georgia to Atlanta, and it's so hot, and she's not.
Jesus.
She said she likes going out for the walk, and it's a city with a lot of trees. Crazy,
It
but
does have a lot of trees in Atlanta. It is a very treed
yeah,
city.
that's what she said she likes. I don't know. I take it. I'll see how long it'll be. She says she's never coming back. I don't know though. When it gets
Jeez.
a little bit too hot. Anyway, what
Right
do you
today,
guys?
we're at 93 today, which I
Ugh.
know doesn't sound that hot, but people don't
Oh,
understand.
it's hot. That's
I
hot.
It's incredible just to think, like, I remember growing up and it would never, like, 88, 89, those were like the highest temperature. To me, it would just regularly be maybe between 84 and 87 would be summertime. But now we're like routinely above 90, close to 100. And I just think,
And
wow, I mean,
why
I'm
are
not
these
even
people
30 yet.
these people are oblivious? What's wrong with them? Air conditioning?
It is because that's how you retreat. I mean, it's how you deal with it. I mean, I spend most of my day either at the office or at home or in my car. I mean, and if that's how most
It's
people
too
spend their
hot.
day, that means you can't really feel what it's like to be in 90 plus degree heat by just walking to your mailbox or just walking in your car. Yeah, it might be like, oh, that's hot. But no. You haven't felt what it feels like not to have access to water, to have your body sweating and not being able to cool down. Okay? You just felt a temporary heat wave as you stepped out into a hotter environment as you're going to your car to turn on your air. Okay, it is very different than if you're actually living and working outside in these conditions, which none of us have that sort of exposure. The exposure we have is just these brief, oh, I got to go get the mail, or oh, I got to walk my
No,
dog,
I
or
was outside for 6 hours today. It was hot and I was weeding my garden. So, it was 80 something. Well, yesterday it was 90. I've been outside. I am outside. I am
yeah.
literally killing myself. It hurt so much at night, but I can't give up on
And
growing food.
you got to be careful, Sandy, because one thing I was telling a close friend of mine, he's older. Well, he's older than you, but I was telling him that, uh, and he told me, Antonio, don't worry, I'm not worried about the heat. I can take it better than you. And I said, you know what? Those 800 folks that died in the Northwest from the heat stroke, none of them thought they were going to die the day before. Okay,
Okay,
that's not
so
how.
what's my threshold, Antonio, to work in the garden then?
Well,
89?
certainly you don't want to be outside for 6 hours. I mean, I would say that if you're going to
Today
do
was
it,
good though. I couldn't stop working because I got so much done. It was
I would say
only,
maybe
what was
two
it
hour
today?
little bursts with moderate
Yeah,
activity, drinking not ice cold water, but cool
right.
water.
Yeah.
Um, but no more
Okay.
than 2 hours with constant exposure. I mean, you literally talking about wet bulb temperatures, which I'm not I'm sure that you weren't at. But remember,
No.
at wet bulb temperatures, it only takes 6 hours of their exposure to die.
Yeah, you're
So,
right.
so you could be undergoing heat stress and not necessarily know it.
Well, then I'm just gonna have to like go in the basement because it's the coolest place in my place. The cats
Yeah,
like it. I'll go in there. All
and
right.
that's
I
that's
promise I'll
fine.
take care of
It,
myself.
as you get older, you have to be more sensitive to these things. But
Mm,
what you want to do is 2 hours on, and then maybe for an
okay.
hour, go inside and cool down and come back. It's gonna
Yeah.
prolong your day, obviously, but that's
Yeah.
much better than having a heat stroke.
Human says work at night. I usually do when I'm not doing a show. I'm outside. I start at 6 o'clock. You know when it
Yeah,
starts getting night.
working at
I
night or
like
working
that.
in the early morning is
Yeah.
also a good way. I mean,
Yeah.
because you definitely don't want to be out in the middle of the day when the sun's just beating down on you.
Well,
Um,
today was different. I couldn't stop. I was on a mission, and the more weeds that came out, and the cleaner the beds looked, and the happier the actual real plants looked, the better I felt. I guess I was just a woman on a mission. It wasn't so hot that I would have sunstroke today, and I wear a hat and a headband, and
and guys, look
I'm
forward to the
well.
weather. I know many of
Um,
you follow Nicholas Humphrey, our
yeah.
local meteorologist, but we're going to get sweltering temperatures all next week throughout the month of July, really,
Is it going to be
for
here too?
most of the lower 48. So do be prepared. We are going to be having a scorcher throughout July. I was just looking at the Ventusky,
Oh
um,
yeah, I would pull it
spelled
all up, but I
Ventusky.
yeah, yeah, Ventus Sky. I'd pull it
Um,
up, but I'm too lazy to do all that shit tonight. I'm sorry.
no, that's fine. But
Uh,
just to let people know, it is going to be a hot one. So
I don't
please do
know.
take care of yourselves.
The highest here
Eh,
next week is 82 and the lowest is 60.
okay, so she might be
58.
out of it. But I definitely do know
Yeah,
if you're
I
across
hope
the
so.
plains or in the
That's why I
southeast,
fucking
you
live
might have
here.
to.
Yep.
You know what? And it doesn't hurt people to check your air conditioner. Don't let your air conditioner going out be when you check it. Check it now to make sure that it's running properly, that there's no ice buildup or anything like that, and make sure that your system's running properly. Because if your system goes down, my her system went down, and she had to wait 2 weeks just for people to come out and
Wow.
diagnose it. And
Holy
we were in the
shit.
middle of a heat wave, and we're getting almost 100-degree temperatures daily.
How did they get
So
through that? How did they acclimate to that?
she had to go and sleep over at my mom's house.
Thank God
Um,
she had a plan. Thank something.
yeah, yeah, and that's another thing people don't realize is that that's the silent killer, and I'm wondering this summer when people are going to wake up to that reality is that these temperatures are taxing our energy grids like nobody's business,
And all the
and
heat that comes out of those air conditioners, how much heat spills out of them. It's just heating up outside, even worse with 4 million air conditioners going on.
right, but once the power goes out and that system stops. What happens is the inside of your house will get at 90 degrees. You can't sleep in 90-degree weather inside your home. Okay, folks? And if you do, you might end up dying from heat exhaustion.
Oh my God. I'll sleep in the basement with the cats. I know. I'm always the comic levity here. We talk about such serious shit, and I can't help myself. You know, the comedy levity.
Well, Sandy,
I
I think we've had an excellent
We have. I have a question
talk.
before we go. I have a couple of things here. Just let's look at Gary. We could do this another time. Appreciate the conversation, Sandy. Please let's talk about Christo fascism. This is serious stuff. Within 2 years, the fascist theocracy will be set up. It will take a miracle to prevent. So listen, I think we can do some research on this, and we can possibly do a show on that. Maybe I don't know if it's a good environmental coffee house show. We'll see. It might be good for
You
my
know
new
what's so
channel,
funny? I'll
Sperm
add
Have
this.
Rights. Yes.
When I was growing up, that was all the crave. Before the whole climate crisis, the online intellectual community, it was like the secularists, against Christians. It was Christopher Hitchens, Dawkins, and a whole host of others against the intellectuals, William Lane Craig and folks, and we were having these debates, but we kind of moved past that because it seemed like it was a settled question that God was mostly a figment of humanity's imagination. It was actually mostly humans projecting a sense of self onto something greater than themselves, not in actually a romantic or good way, but actually in a very tyrannical way. And that's kind of where we resign God. Is just like God is a creation of humans to control other people. But this is now being thrust back, and what do we see? The devices of God being used to control other people again.
Wow.
Uh, so now these big arguments about the Christians are relitigated, and they're taking us to task on all the issues that we were afraid about in the 90s and the 2000s. I remember when Jerry Falwell, he was a Christian maniac, but he said that we
There's a
got
lot of them
9/11
now.
because of gay marriage, because of
Mm,
secularists, because of atheists, and
yeah.
that's why 9/11 happened. So that's the
That's what we're
type
up
of
against.
that's what we're up against. That's what's
It's
sitting right
worse
now,
though. Did you see
six to
my
three on the Supreme
American
Court.
did you see my American Evangelical video? Well, it got taken down for hate speech. And I got all
Ha!
of listen, I got everything from YouTube from these preachers. I put it together in a good way, but guess what? It's still up on the show, guys. So you can see it. It's good. It's just timestamp it. I'll
You know what?
timestamp it. It's still up on
Sandy,
the
after
show.
this, I got to show you because there's a video, and I used to watch it when I was in high school because
Yeah.
it's just like I'm a weird guy. But it's a
Yeah.
little
You're a
montage.
weird guy just because you're a weird guy.
It's a little montage of the religious right
Yeah.
at the Republican convention
Yeah.
in 1992. And, all of the horrible people, Ralph Reed, Pat Robertson, I mean, all of the horrible people are there. And the agenda that we're seeing today that has completely died off. Like we thought with the Obama era, all of this was in the past. This was a long time ago. And even
Ugh.
though, the footage that you'll see, it looks, I mean, is from the 90s. Everything they're saying, the abortion agenda, the homosexual agenda, the homosexual turned agenda. Um, I mean, everything that was on center stage in 1992 down there at the Republican convention in Dallas is now
Now
just
happening. They've been planning this
it,
for a long time.
they have. I
Wow.
mean, that's the thing about this is that that's the thing about a history is that historically the left is always disorganized. They might have really good ideas and things like that, really disorganized. The right always has horrific ideas, and they are immaculately organized.
Oh my God. And it's amazing because they're so stupid. So many of them are just ignorant morons. Or they put the ignorant morons in the front and some brainy like the Koch brothers and their expensive attorneys are in the background. They're on the shoulder.
Well, just like the Supreme Court justices, when I think about these folks, these are the type of folks
Amy.
who have never had an original thought in their life.
Probably.
They have done exactly what they've been told since day one. Amy Coney Barrett is the hall monitor who walks down the hall with her hands behind her back and will write your name on the board for silent lunch if you sneeze. That's who these
You're
folks
killing
are.
me. Oh
Um,
God.
and when you give these people power, this is what's going to happen. You know,
Exactly.
I just that's what we're dealing with. That's what we're dealing with.
That's what we're doing. That's why you're with us, because you're the historian and you can make sense of all of this. I make sense of it. It may be fragmented. I listen to you. I get it.
We're dealing with six Mitchell McConnells on the Supreme
Oh,
Court.
six Mitch McConnells. Hey, Collapse Chronicles. Six Mitch McConnells. Yeah. Bye bye, Miss American Pie. Shit. I wish I could play it. Well, I love you, Antonio. We'll do this again. It's always fun. It's always, I learn so much. when I'm with you. And you know that. And we have a state of the planet we have to do soon with Nicholas, with the whole team, Jennifer, everybody. I hope.
Absolutely.
All right, absolutely. All right, guys. Thank you, everyone. I'm sorry I didn't get to all the questions. It's an hour. We want to do this. Bye bye, Miss American Pie. Wish I could play that. Oh, my God. Well, I'm going to pick something else to play. Let's see. How about we play something fun to go out with? Here we go. All right, we're going to dance our way out of this. Woohoo! We're going to have fun. We're going to dance our way out.
Like
yeah,
in
baby.
1999.
Yeah. Woo! It's 1999. Good night, guys. Woohoo! Bye. I love all of you too.